The scent of mountain pine and winter frost clung to my clothes as I was escorted through the stone corridors of the Northern Pack's stronghold. Each breath materialized before me in small clouds of vapor that dissipated into the frigid air. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, a wild, erratic rhythm that I feared would betray my terror to the guards flanking me. Their expressions remained impassive, but their nostrils flared occasionally, no doubt catching the sour notes of fear emanating from my skin. I shouldn't have been there. I was human, fragile, disposable. Our kind had maintained an uneasy peace with the werewolf packs for centuries, but territorial violations were still punishable by death. My transgression had been accidental, a wrong turn while hiking that led me across the invisible boundary marking their lands. But intention meant nothing to these creatures of instinct and ancient law. "Keep moving," the larger guard growled, his massive hand pressing against my back with enough force to propel me forward without seeming to exert any effort at all. The weight of my grandmother's silver pendant felt suddenly heavy against my chest. She had given it to me on her deathbed, whispering words I still carried. "Silver protects, dear one, but wisdom saves." I hadn't understood then. I was beginning to now. We passed through an archway, adorned with carvings of wolves in various hunting poses. The temperature dropped further as we entered what could only be described as a throne room. Stone braziers lined the walls, flames dancing and casting long shadows across the floor. At the far end, elevated on a dais of polished black granite, sat a throne fashioned from antlers and dark wood, and on it sat him. Even from a distance, his presence seemed to fill the cavernous space. He was unnaturally still, observing my approach with eyes that glowed amber in the firelight. His shoulders were broad beneath a cloak of midnight fur, his jaw sharp and unyielding. Black hair fell to his shoulders, framing features that seemed carved from marble, beautiful in the way that deadly things often are. The Alpha King. The guards forced me to my knees before him, the stone floor bruising my skin through my thin hiking pants. My blonde hair fell forward, curtaining my face, offering a momentary shield from his penetrating gaze. "Look at me, human," he commanded, his voice deep and resonant. I raised my eyes slowly, fighting every instinct screaming at me to keep my gaze lowered. In the world of wolves, eye contact was a challenge, but averting my eyes completely would mark me as prey. I had to find the balance, to show respect without surrendering my humanity entirely. His expression remained unreadable as he studied me. One hand rested on the arm of his throne, long fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm that echoed in the silence. "You crossed our borders," he stated. Not a question, but a pronouncement of guilt. "I didn't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. But I knew he could hear me. The trail markers. They must have been moved. I would never intentionally. Silence. The single word sliced through the air. Ignorance of our boundaries is not an excuse we recognize. The penalty is death. A tremor ran through me, and I fought to keep my composure. Death, so final, so absolute, for what amounted to a wrong turn on a hiking trail. The injustice of it burned in my chest, momentarily overpowering my fear. "That's barbaric," I said, immediately regretting the words as they left my lips. A dangerous smile curved his mouth. "We are what we are, human. Civilization is a thin veneer your kind clings to. We acknowledge our nature." He rose from his throne in one fluid motion, descending the steps with predatory grace. Each footfall was silent, despite his imposing size. He circled me slowly, and I fought the urge to turn, to keep him in my sight. The guards stepped back, creating a perimeter that felt more like an arena than a throne room. "You have spirit," he observed, his breath warm against my ear as he leaned close. "Most humans would be begging by now." "Would that help?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. A low chuckle rumbled from his chest. "No." He completed his circuit, coming to stand before me once again. His gaze swept over me assessingly, and I felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. "There's something different about you," he said, head tilting slightly. "You smell of fear, yes, but something else too. Something familiar." My grandmother's pendant seemed to pulse against my skin, a family heirloom, she'd called it, an ancient protection. "I'm just a hiker," I said, "nothing special." His eyes narrowed. "We shall see." With a gesture, he dismissed the guards. They hesitated, a barely perceptible pause that spoke volumes, before bowing and retreating from the chamber. The massive doors closed behind them with a resonant boom that felt somehow final. We were alone. "Stand," he commanded. I rose on shaky legs, acutely aware of our size difference. He towered over me, his presence making the vast room feel suddenly claustrophobic. "There are alternatives to death," he said, circling me again. Rare exceptions I might grant, if sufficiently intrigued. Hope flickered dangerously in my chest. "What kind of alternatives?" He stopped directly before me, close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, a test of sorts. "One night in my chambers. If you survive until dawn, your life is yours to keep." My breath caught. Survive? What exactly would I be surviving? The smile that spread across his face held no warmth. Me, little human. My presence. My bed. He reached out, one finger tracing the line of my jaw. Most humans cannot endure proximity to an alpha for extended periods. The power we emanate overwhelms your fragile systems. Your hearts give out, your minds break. But if you can withstand it, he shrugged. Perhaps you deserve to live. My mind raced, searching for options that didn't exist. I was trapped in his territory, surrounded by his pack. There was no escape, no cavalry coming to my rescue. Just this impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. "And if I refuse, then your death will be immediate rather than merely probable," he replied with brutal honesty. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. My grandmother's words echoed again. "Silver protects, but wisdom saves." Was this wisdom? Accepting this deadly bargain? "Very well," I said, opening my eyes to meet his gaze directly. "One night. And if I survive, I walk free. Your word on it." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. "You have it. My word as Alpha King." He extended his hand, and I hesitated only a moment before placing my much smaller one in his palm. His skin burned hot against mine, the contact sending an unexpected jolt up my arm. "Come," he said, his fingers closing around mine. "Night approaches." He led me through corridors deeper into the stronghold, past curious eyes that watched our progress with expressions ranging from shock to contempt. I held my head high, refusing to be cowed despite the trembling in my limbs. What choice did I have but to face this with whatever dignity I could muster? The Alpha King's chambers were not what I expected. Instead of the barbaric den I had imagined, the space was elegant and spare. Massive windows overlooked snow-covered mountains, the glass somehow keeping the bitter cold at bay. A fire roared in a stone hearth larger than any I had seen. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes whose spines bore titles in languages I couldn't decipher. At the center of it all stood a bed that seemed carved from a single piece of dark wood, draped with furs and linens that looked impossibly soft. "You seem surprised," he observed, releasing my hand and moving to pour something amber-colored into 2 crystal glasses. "I expected something different. Bones and blood smears?" He offered me one of the glasses. "We're not mindless beasts, despite what your kind believes." I accepted the drink cautiously, sniffing it before taking a small sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down my throat. "Whiskey, expensive and smoky." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" He studied me over the rim of his glass. "Perhaps I'm bored with the predictable. Perhaps I'm curious about a human who wanders into wolf territory wearing silver and speaking of barbarism to an alpha's face." He set his glass down. "Or perhaps there's something about you that—" He trailed off, his expression darkening momentarily. "That what?" "Nothing," he said dismissively. "Remove your coat. You won't need it here." I hesitated, then slowly unzipped my hiking jacket. Beneath it, I wore a simple thermal top, practical for the mountain climate. As I laid the coat aside, I saw his eyes fix on my grandmother's pendant, now visible against the fabric of my shirt. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice suddenly tense. I touched it instinctively. It was my grandmother's, a family heirloom. He moved toward me with that unnatural speed, suddenly close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His fingers hovered near the pendant without touching it. "This symbol," he said, his voice low. "Do you know what it means?" I shook my head. She never explained it, only that it would protect me. A harsh laugh escaped him. "Protect you?" "Yes, I suppose it might." He stepped back, regarding me with new intensity. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Eleanor," I said. "Eleanor Hayes." The glass in his hand shattered, startling me. Blood and whiskey dripped from his fingers, but he seemed not to notice. "Impossible," he whispered. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the door. The Alpha King's expression shifted, the vulnerability I'd glimpsed vanishing behind a mask of authority. "Enter," he commanded. A woman appeared, tall and severe, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of me, but quickly returned to her Alpha. "My king, the northern delegation has arrived early. They're demanding an audience." He cursed under his breath. "Now is not the time, Celine." "They insist it cannot wait. They speak of border incursions to the east." The tension in the room thickened. I stood forgotten for the moment, watching the silent communication that seemed to pass between them. "Very well," he finally said. "I will meet them." He turned to me, his expression unreadable once more. "You will remain here. Attempt to leave, and our arrangement is void." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He strode to the door, pausing briefly to address the woman called Celine. "She is not to be harmed," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And no one enters this room until my return." Celine bowed her head in acknowledgement, casting one last curious glance at me before following him out. The door closed with a heavy thud, and I heard the distinct click of a lock engaging. Alone in the Alpha King's chambers, I released the breath I'd been holding. My legs gave way, and I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, mind racing. What had my grandmother's pendant meant to him? Why had the mere mention of her name shattered his composure? Outside the windows, darkness began to fall over the mountains, the sky shifting from blue to deepening violet. Night was coming, and with it, the true test of whether I would survive until dawn. I touched the silver pendant, tracing its intricate pattern with my fingertip. For the first time, I wondered if I had been brought to this place not by accident, but by a destiny set in motion long before I was born. Night descended fully beyond the windows, stars appearing one by one against the velvet darkness. I remained perched on the edge of the bed, caught between exhaustion and hypervigilance. Every creak of the stronghold, every distant howl carried on the wind made me flinch. My fingers hadn't left my grandmother's pendant since the Alpha King's departure. The fire crackled in the hearth, shadows dancing across the stone walls. Despite its warmth, a chill had settled deep in my bones, the kind that comes from fear rather than cold. I stood on shaky legs and began to explore the chamber, needing movement to calm my frayed nerves. The bookshelves yielded volumes in languages both familiar and utterly foreign. Some looked ancient, their bindings cracked with age, while others appeared nearly new. I ran my fingers along their spines, pausing at one bound in dark red leather. When I pulled it from the shelf, it fell open to a page marked with a pressed flower, a small blue blossom I didn't recognize. The text was in English, surprisingly, a journal of sorts. 4th moon of winter, year 673. Another human settlement encroaches on the eastern borders. The council urges war, but I counsel patience. Not all humans are enemies. Some remember the old ways, the old bonds. Some still carry ancient blood, though diluted by generations. I think of her sometimes, wondering if... The entry ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted. I closed the book carefully, returning it to its place with a strange reluctance. The intimacy of the words felt like an intrusion, a glimpse into thoughts never meant for my eyes. Moving to the windows, I gazed out at the moonlit mountains. Snow blanketed everything, creating a landscape of silver and shadow. In the distance, dark shapes moved through the trees, wolves on patrol perhaps, or hunting beneath the cold light of the stars. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the bite of winter just beyond the pain. Beautiful, isn't it? I whirled around, heart leaping into my throat. The Alpha King stood in the doorway, watching me with those unnerving amber eyes. I hadn't heard the door open. Yes, I stammered, hating the tremor in my voice. The mountains. He moved into the room, shrugging off the heavy cloak from his shoulders and draping it over a chair. Beneath it, he wore a simple black shirt that did little to conceal the power in his frame. I noticed a fresh cut along his jawline, already healing. The meeting didn't go well, I observed, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes narrowed slightly. Politics rarely does, especially among wolves. He poured himself another drink, not offering me one this time. The northern pack believes we've grown soft, too accommodating to humans and their endless expansion. And have you? I asked. A dark smile curved his lips. What do you think, little human? I've given you a chance to live, haven't I? Many would call that weakness. I swallowed hard. Or wisdom. Something flickered in his expression. A recognition, perhaps. He moved toward me, and it took everything I had not to back away. When he reached for my pendant, I flinched involuntarily. May I? He asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. I nodded, though my pulse raced wildly as his fingers brushed against my collarbone. He lifted the silver pendant, examining it in the firelight. This symbol, he said, is the mark of the Guardians, humans who once lived in harmony with wolves, who protected the secret of our existence from those who would destroy us. His eyes lifted to mine. They were respected, honored even, among the packs. Until the great betrayal. What betrayal? I whispered. He released the pendant, his hand falling away. A story for another time, perhaps. If you survive the night. The reminder of my precarious situation sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I retreated a step, bumping against the window behind me. Don't worry, he said, his voice carrying a hint of something that might have been amusement. I don't intend to devour you, not in the way you fear, at least. Heat rushed to my cheeks at his implication. Then what exactly am I surviving? You said your presence could kill me, and it can. He moved to the fire, stirring the embers with an iron poker. Sparks flew upward, briefly illuminating his profile. An alpha's energy is potent. Most humans cannot bear it for long. Their bodies react as they would to extreme stress. Elevated heart rate, adrenaline surge, eventually system failure. That sounds like murder, not a test, I said, anger momentarily overriding fear. He turned to face me, firelight casting half his face in shadow. It is both, and neither. He set the poker aside. If you're strong enough to endure it, perhaps you're strong enough to deserve life. No one should have to earn the right to live, I said quietly. His expression darkened. In this world, my world, everything is earned. Nothing is given freely. I thought of my life before this moment. My small apartment in the city, my job at the university library, the quiet existence I'd built for myself after my grandmother's death. So ordinary, so safe. How quickly it had all been stripped away, leaving me at the mercy of ancient laws and a predator's whims. You should rest, he said, interrupting my thoughts. The night grows late, and the true test has barely begun. My eyes darted to the bed, the only bed in the chamber, and back to him. Where will you... Beside you, he replied matter-of-factly. That is the test, after all, to endure my proximity until dawn. Panic clawed at my throat. Sharing a bed with this creature, this predator who could tear me apart with his bare hands? I'd expected many things when I was brought to his stronghold, but not this intimate form of torture. I can't, I whispered, hating the weakness in my voice. You can, he countered. And you will, unless you prefer the alternative, death. The word hung unspoken between us. My grandmother's pendant seemed to warm against my skin, a reminder of her strength. She had faced unknowable hardships in her life, whispered stories of escape, of sacrifice, of survival against impossible odds. If she could endure, so could I. Fine, I said, lifting my chin. One night. Something like approval flashed in his eyes. He gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before. Through there, you'll find what you need. The adjoining room was a bathing chamber